Hey everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel and happy May the 4th. It is officially Star Wars Day once again, and today I'm going to be reviewing Season 3 of The Mandalorian. This season once again follows the Mandalorian Din Djarin after the events of Season 2 where Moff Gideon was defeated and he sent Grogu away with Luke Skywalker because Grogu needed to be with his own kind, the Jedi. This is also a follow-up to the Book of Boba Fett where the two of them got reunited immediately. That still irks me to no end. I'm laughing, but I also feel really bad for the people that said, yeah, I don't need to watch the Book of Boba Fett, I'm just gonna wait till Mandalorian Season 3. Only to be in for such a surprise when they found out that Grogu was immediately reunited. That is assuming they don't have access to the internet. I just find that amusing, but it's also really sad. But yes, this season does pick up after the events of those two shows, and we just follow the further adventures of Grogu and Din Djarin. So this review is going to contain spoilers, because normally when it comes to reviewing TV shows, I usually review them by the season if I can, or just wait for the entire series to be done so I can do a full-on review. And I always review TV shows with the impression that you've already seen it. If I ever do a spoiler-free review for TV, it's usually an episode-by-episode basis. So after Mandalorian Season 2, I was hyped to see what they would do with Season 3 because it seemed like that was the end for Din and Grogu's story, and it seemed like a really bold choice to have them part ways. I thought, you know what? That could lead to Season 3 being something radically different. Okay, maybe not entirely different, but at least interesting now that Grogu's not around. But of course, Grogu had to sell a bunch of toys. He had to create a bunch of internet memes to the point where when we got to the Book of Boba Fett, I know that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau have a lot of free reign when it comes to these shows, but I'm really convinced that Grogu coming back so quickly was not their decision. I really do believe that Disney went to them and said, Grogu sells a lot of toys. You're gonna bring him back as soon as possible. I don't care if you have to make 2.5 episodes of a Boba Fett show be dedicated to the Mandalorian and reuniting the two. Get it done. However, something that the Book of Boba Fett did introduce us to was Din Djarin being exiled as a Mandalorian by the Armorer. So I thought, okay, maybe this season will involve Din Djarin going off to try and figure out what it actually means to be a Mandalorian. Is it just the helmet, or is it something more than that? Just because he was not born of Mandalore, does that actually make him a true Mandalorian? And considering that the Watch is pretty much a cult, essentially, it would have been interesting for him to team up with Bo-Katan, and she pretty much opens his eyes to the fact that, yeah, the group that you follow, they're a cult. In fact, she flat out says that in the first episode of this season, which I loved because I was thinking, yeah, tell him, Bo. But no, Din Djarin basically goes on a quest to try to redeem himself, and that all gets wrapped up at the end of the second episode. Din Djarin redeems himself by bathing in the waters of Mandalore. He comes back, shows proof, and the Armorer says, welcome back to the tribe. And that was the first indication that I knew that this season was not going to be all that good, because the biggest problem with Season 3 of The Mandalorian is that it sets up so many details in one episode and then almost immediately resolves them in the following episode. And you go through this several times. I mentioned Din Djarin trying to redeem himself after being exiled in Book of Boba Fett, but then you have these pirates that Din Djarin pissed off, led by a giant piece of salad. I don't even know what to describe this alien. But in the next episode featuring those pirates, they're wiped out instantly. And I thought, okay, so forget them being a reoccurring villain that could be fun to watch. And then the season pretty much shifts gears away from Din Djarin to Bo-Katan, more specifically, because halfway through the season, the Armorer tells Bo-Katan that you walk both ways. You walked among us for a bit, where we only wear a helmet, but you've also spent your life around Mandalorians who have no problem taking off their helmets and showing their faces. You're the one that can reunite all Mandalorians so we can take back our home planet. Which is interesting because in the book of Boba Fett, the armorer basically trash-talked Bo-Katan and saying that, yeah, she was the one responsible for the Empire bombing Mandalore. So it's weird that she would be the one to go, you're the only one who can save us. Or I guess it's Star Wars, I should say, you're our only hope. But you know, I mean, Bo-Katan is an interesting character with a lot of history if you watched Rebels or the Clone Wars, and Katee Sackhoff still does a really good job. This really was a character she was born to play, considering that no one else has played this character except her. But it is a shame that Din Djarin just kind of gets shoved to the sideline, and because he gets shoved to the sideline, so does Grogu, proving the point further that he was only brought back for marketability, because Grogu serves literally no purpose in this movie outside of a few laughs. So in hindsight, this season should have actually been called Mandalorians, you know, like Alien to Aliens, because it shifts focus away from the main character of the last two seasons to focus on all Mandalorians. Now, based on how I'm talking about this season, you probably are thinking to yourself, wow, this feels like a jumbled, misguided, and rambling mess. And in a way, it pretty much is, because a lot of plot threads that are just introduced and then resolved instantly. The fact that we don't actually know what this season is about until episode 5, which this season does that better than Book of Boba Fett, because Book of Boba Fett took us 4 episodes for us to finally figure out where this season was going, only to just get sidetracked and be Mandalorian season 2.5. This season doesn't really do that, and the one episode where it feels like it does that, episode 3, actually lends itself to some really good world building. Episode 3 starts off and ends with Din Djarin and Bo-Katan, but the rest of the episode is dedicated to Dr. Pershing and an Imperial officer who served under Moff Gideon. The entire episode is basically about them getting a new life with the New Republic and learning to work under it now. And starting with that episode, going into episode 5, it does give us a unique perspective on how the New Republic functions and how some of their actions or failure to address everything going on in the galaxy actually led to the rise of the First Order, because that officer that served under Moff Gideon is still working for him, and there are moments where the New Republic just kind of blows off the fact that the Empire might be rising again, and as we of course know, they went off to the unknown regions and became the First Order. So that's a cool bit of world building that still ties into The Mandalorian as a show because of Dr. Pershing. But episode 6? Oh boy. Okay, let me back up for a second. I don't think this episode is as bad as people make it out to be, because Star Wars fans have a habit of making something sound far worse than it actually is. I mean, take a look at The Last Jedi Backlash, which, FYI, I still love. But episode 6, it falls into the same plot structure trappings that a lot of season 2 fell under, where, okay, our heroes are going off to find someone. Hold up, side quest. After you complete this side quest, then you can continue your main quest. That's how a good chunk of season 2 felt, and with episode 6 in season 3, it might very well be the worst use of that plot structure. And then I've heard fans complain about some of the people that were in this episode, like Lizzo, for example. I gotta be totally honest, I'm not up to date when it comes to music, so I'm not all that familiar with Lizzo, so I wasn't bothered by her in this show. I thought, okay, she's wearing some really elegant and maybe over-the-top dresses like Queen Amidala did in Phantom Menace, but I thought she fit well in Star Wars. Jack Black, on the other hand, felt very out of place. It was just Jack Black with a big bushy beard acting like Jack Black. This episode was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, which honestly shocked me considering she directed the best episode of Book of Boba Fett and season 2 of this show. But it seemed like she had no desire to have Jack Black be pulled back. I mean, he wasn't crazy rock and roll Jack Black, but he was doing a funny accent and he was admittedly goofy. Say what you want about George Lucas as a director when it comes to the prequels, but with Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu, Lucas knew how to pull him back. He actually got a really calm and restrained performance from Samuel L. Jackson. And then as for Christopher Lloyd, I love Christopher Lloyd. He's obviously my favorite movie of all time, Back to the Future. But throughout this entire episode, all I could think of was, that is Doc Brown in a Star Wars show wearing a Star Trek uniform, and it is very distracting. And the last thing I'll mention about this episode, it might be a nitpick, but the CGI on the B-1 battle droids is terrible. I don't understand how CGI battle droids in 2023 look far worse than the battle droids in 1999. But then the episode after that, episode 7, had some potential because it was finally involving all the Mandalorians grouping up together to take on the remnants of the Empire on Mandalore, more specifically Moff Gideon. But then episode 8 pretty much just rushes everything. Moff Gideon is killed right after his reintroduction, which I don't believe that for a second, because if we've learned anything from Star Wars, the villains do not stay dead. The heroes, sure. But yeah, from Moff Gideon's very quick death, the unceremonious destruction of the Darksaber, Paz Vizsla's death being completely overlooked and ignored considering that there was an entire episode dedicated to saving his son, and the overall just really shoddy and terrible action scenes. There's an entire sequence where jet troopers are fighting the Mandalorians in the air, which sounds cool. That would be awesome. But the whole time I was watching this, it's done in close-up, or from a distance to where everyone looks like ants, and I thought, man, this would look really cool if I could tell what was going on. And then the end of the episode where Din Djarin and Grogu pretty much retire, because I don't believe that either, and it ends with that cartoon circle fade out. Yeah, that didn't really leave a good impression on me. So I don't hate Season 3 of Mandalorian. There are some things that I like about it. For example, the world building when it comes to the New Republic and how they function. There are some fun action scenes prior to the events of the finale. Giancarlo Esposito once again makes for a fantastic villain in Moff Gideon. Also, I have to applaud Star Wars for bringing in a pre-established character, but not making a big deal out of it. Zeb from Star Wars Rebels makes a brief cameo here, once again voiced by Stephen Blum, and they don't make a big deal out of it. He just pops up, and it wasn't until the credits where I realized, wait a minute, that was Zeb. Because in Season 2 of Mandalorian, they made a huge deal about Luke Skywalker coming back, Ahsoka coming back, and Bo-Katan coming back, and same thing with Cad Bane in Book of Boba Fett. With this one, I appreciate that they didn't make a big deal about Zeb popping up. So that was really cool. So on the whole, it was fun, but it's not the best season. It's right now the weakest of all the seasons so far, so watch at your own risk. I still have not given up on Star Wars, like so many people have said, but I will admit, it makes me really nervous for Ahsoka and the movie that Dave Filoni is supposed to make. And I know with the recent development of Star Wars movies, how they're announced and immediately canned, it's easy to just think, oh, well, this Dave Filoni movie's not gonna happen. But the movie is supposed to be a conclusion to everything built up by him and Jon Favreau, with Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka. So they have to commit to this movie. And who knows, maybe the movie will be great, and maybe it'll be one of those things where I look back at this season and go, okay, so this led to this, there's a reason why Grogu is officially back, so it might make this season of Mandalorian better. But for right now, it's fun, but it's not something that I ever have an urge to revisit soon. And there you go, that's my review for Season 3 of The Mandalorian. Now, for those of you wondering where my review for Season 1 of Andor is, Season 2 comes out next year, and that's supposed to be the final season, so I think I'll wait until that comes out so I can review the entire series. Same thing with The Bad Batch. Season 3 of Bad Batch is supposed to be the last one, so I'll wait till that's done to review it as well. But until then, I want to know what you guys think about Mandalorian Season 3. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day, take care of yourselves, and may the Force be with you.